since the spring of last year. It's been a day of demonstrations and resignations at the Climate Change conference in Copenhagen. Police used tear gas as 260 protesters were arrested outside the event after they stormed police barricades. The atmosphere inside the talks hasn't been much better either after the conference president stood down. Well, let's get the latest state of play from Copenhagen and Sky's Holly Williams. Evening, Holly.
Jeremy, we're now 10 days into these talks and there's no agreement on anything. And very soon we'll have 120 world leaders here. They thought they were coming to Copenhagen to sign a deal. So understandably, stress levels here are fairly high. They're so high that in the last few days, doctors in the conference centre have had to deal with 2 heart attacks and a stroke. I should say that none of those people died. The drama today centred on the resignation of the Danish Environment Minister, Connie Hedegaard, from the role of chairman of these talks. She was replaced by the Danish Prime Minister. There's speculation here that that resignation came because African countries were angry with her, thought she was doing a poor job and thought that she was favouring rich countries. Now, as I say, that's speculation, but it's certainly not the only issue here in Copenhagen that people are angry about.
Nobody thought consensus would come easily in Copenhagen, but outside the summit today, disagreement turned violent. Environmental activists refused access to the building, attempted to storm the talks. Danish police repelled them with truncheons and pepper spray, and then detained more than 200 of them. Inside the summit, talks are still deadlocked. Today, African countries laid their cards on the table, asking for £65 billion a year by 2020 to help poorer nations.
We are determined to make sure that in Copenhagen we will have an agreement that all of us, Africa included, are happy with, or obviously there will be no agreement for anyone.
The British Prime Minister, dealing with a recession at home, has come to Copenhagen to drum up financial aid for other countries.
It is in Britain's interest to have a deal, and it's in Britain's interest to show that we can help some of the poorer countries deal with their problems of climate change, both by our technology and in some cases by our financial help.
Developing countries say they need money to deal with problems like rising sea levels and floods. They want cash to buy new technology and reduce their own emissions, and compensation for giving up industries like logging.
To start off with, rich countries will be expected to pay into a fund for 3 years. The EU, which produces about 5 billion tonnes of greenhouse gas a year, will put up £6.5 billion, with Britain's £1.5 billion the biggest contribution. Japan, which produces about 1.4 billion tonnes, will contribute the same amount. But the US, which produces 6.4 billion tonnes, won't put a figure on its contribution. And China, the world's biggest emitter, isn't expected to pay anything at all because it's still a developing country.
If the rich countries don't come in with serious finance to support the green paths and the paths of adaptation of the developing world, they will not sign up to an agreement. And you could understand why they would not, because this is something which is very unjust.
Money is the grease that will turn the wheels at this summit. Even the protesters agree. The question is, how much will be enough to make everyone happy?
So, Holly, it does sound as if it's been a very frustrating week and a half with the time running out and still no real sense of an agreement here.
Jeremy, there is enormous frustration here in the conference centre where these talks are taking place. The fact that Africa made its demands clear today, I think, is some kind of progress. It said it wants £65 billion a year by 2020, and in the sense that it's a number, that it brings any kind of clarity to this process, that I suppose is progress. The problem is, though, that the US, which will inevitably be the largest donor in any financial aid package, hasn't made clear what it can bring to the table. I think that the US will give us a figure by the end of this week. The question then will be whether that number is acceptable to everyone else here.
Holly, thanks very much.